I think we're doing okay, but I think we should talk to someone to make sure. Scott Kelley joins us from Regard Recovery to talk about a lifetime of work in the recovery industry. His first experience with therapy was after the loss of his father at the age of 18, where he caught the bug and went on to get a degree in psychology. He talks about motivational interviewing, coopetition in treatment, and using evidence based practices to manage a recovery center. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery, ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Kurt and I have the privilege and honor to talk with Scott Kelley today on the podcast. Scott is a director of business development at Regard Recovery. He specializes in relationship building and management, marketing, branding, contract acquisition, contract rates and negotiations, regulatory compliance, and collaboration and event planning. Scott, thanks so much for being on with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's apparent that you've been in the industry for a long time and have been able to try on a lot of different roles as you've gone through. And I can tell we talked a little pre-show about even getting into utilization reviews and everything that goes along with that. Maybe talk about a little bit, share with our listeners how you ended up in the industry and why you stayed.
Sure. Well, I had my own, counseling story at the very beginning of my career where I lost my father when I was 18. And probably about 6 months, and it was very sudden. It was a heart attack, so it was, not something we had prepared for necessarily. Although when you have a death, are you ever really prepared? No matter if it's been a long-term illness or sudden death. But I remember probably about 6 months post that event, my mom said, I think we're doing okay, but I think we should talk to somebody just to make sure. And I remember going into treatment, outpatient counseling, and I remember the counselor just being able to help me focus my thoughts, to verbalize what was going on, and to come up with some strategies for my grief. And I just remember being impressed at how much I enjoyed that process. And I thought, this might be something along the lines of what I wanted to do. Got into college, and I had also worked at the Y for many years with kids. So I'd gotten into college, wanted to go into psychology. Got into that, got my degree in psychology, and when I got out, then I started work at a treatment facility for children as a tech, and we talked a little bit about that, but just having an appreciation at the direct care level of what goes on. And then further in my career, as I moved through different positions, I actually moved into substance abuse, co-occurring, but more on the adult side of things, and while I don't have my own recovery story, I have family members that have had to go into treatment, that I've had to get into treatment, friends as well, and then some that are still in active addiction. So I can appreciate it from the family side of things quite well. When I received that call, I know exactly what that family member's going through.
And it's your story is a little bit different than some in the sense that you don't have that recovery story yourself, although you can definitely relate to some of the challenges that come with that with family members. Do you ever feel like you get rejected by some of the people you work with because it's like, yeah, you don't get me, you don't know what's going on here?
Oh, absolutely. There is, I think, an addiction culture that people kind of put a hierarchy on people that maybe don't have their own story. Not from everybody, but I also try to tell folks as well, and I use this analogy. Does your oncologist have had to have had cancer in order to treat you? Does your doctor need to have experienced everything that you've experienced in order to be the expert medically on what to do for you? So, I've known a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. I think there's a commercial about that somewhere, but I didn't mean to plagiarize whoever that was. But I think, again, it's just having an appreciation for the different criteria, diagnostics, therapeutic interventions, evidence-based practices that are tried and true that work, and then just being able to identify from a family member's perspective on that desperation to get folks into treatment, and then say, hey, we've got the know-how, we've got state-of-the-art facilities, we've got evidence-based practices that when you utilize those, you can find recovery and you can get well.
I love your explanation of, how you explain that you don't have to necessarily go through what somebody else went through in order to be able to help them and get them into treatment and connect with them, which it's true. That's totally true. Because if everybody had a recovery story, I mean, that's a little unrealistic to expect that as well. But then, there's the idea that you really need that peer support. You need those people that you do feel like you can relate to and that you get your particular story. And so those are both important pieces. Have you spent a lot of time doing interventions or have any experience with the intervention part of the industry?
I jokingly say I'm not an interventionist, but I play one on TV. No, I don't do that, and I'm not trained in that per se. So if there's a formal intervention that needs to be done, we do contract that out, or we would look to an expert if somebody is looking for that. I use a little bit of a technique, and I've trained my admission staff on this in previous positions, but I use a little bit of motivational interviewing when I'm actually talking to a client that's called in and is looking for treatment. Again, just bringing it back to the original reason why they keep calling or why they've called, because initially they're calling for that help, but then they start to talk themselves out of it and find reasons why, well, I can't do it this week because of A, B, or C. And again, just bringing it back to, well, now let's talk about again why you called. You said you wanted to get your driver's license back. You said your wife was leaving you if you didn't get treatment, and that you wouldn't be able to see your kids again. So again, tell me what that looks like.
I like it.
And then I let them sit in that for a little bit, and then they start talking till finally you get to a point, and while it's not a therapy session, but finally you get to a point where they've talked themselves back into treatment, and they're saying, I'm coming in today at 4 or whatever. So I think that, it's definitely an effective tool, but, much needed. Again, not an interventionist, and for those that do it and do it well, I mean, kudos to them. And there is a time and a place for that, especially if all efforts on our end, on the front end, just speaking to a client on the phone have failed, then I'll suggest to the family, hey, it doesn't sound like, your loved one is ready. Might I suggest utilization of an interventionist? So.
Very good. Scott, you've been, in a lot of different places. You've been associated with quite a few different treatment facilities. How many of those have you kind of been part of from the ground up of establishing and creating?
Well, I opened one, and it was where we had purchased a property. We had gone through the renovations, of that property, picked out the finishes, what we wanted it to look like functionally, space-wise, so that it was more conducive to therapy and treatment and different levels of care. To the writing of policies and procedure, although I had a lot of help there, but if you know the administrative code of 65D30, you kind of write from that. And then, I hired all the staff, put together an orientation, went through licensure, got it up and running, that type of thing. So I think that, and it's a lot of hard work, I think, and as that should be, you don't want anybody just hanging out a shingle. You want to make sure that people are going through their paces and that they really are doing it for the right reasons. But it was a challenge for sure, but one, it's still up and running to this day and providing great care for people. So, I'm very proud of the work that we did on that.
And what would you say that are some of the most important concepts or pieces when you're building a program like that, a treatment program where you want to help a lot of people and specialize? What are some of the key components when you're putting a program together like that?
I think surrounding yourself with people that are experts in the business that can lend themselves to you, that could give you advice or provide some guidance. I had a lot of help in that arena, a lot of people that I leaned on for their advice. And I think, also hiring the right people, having the right people in the right seats on the bus. We always, joke about that, but I think that cohesive team that you would have, creating a culture that you want to be a place where, first of all, staff members want to work and they want to tell their friends, hey, you got to get a job here. They're doing some amazing things here. And then a culture where patients would say, if you want to recover, you need to go here. And I think that starts from the top down and how you set that tone. But team player, definitely. Never having the attitude of that's not my job. Even as the CEO, there was something in the hallway that needed to be cleaned or a toilet that needed to be plunged. There wasn't, hey, let's go get so-and-so. It's, I got this. And I think that, when you have, I've always had more of a servant leadership approach. So, when you come at it from that perspective, I think people are willing to come alongside you shoulder to shoulder and say, all right, we're going to do this as a team. So I don't know, maybe if that answered your question or not, I hope.
Great perspective of kind of building that culture and creating a space where people want to work and where people want to get better. I was curious, I see that Regard Recovery Center has 3 locations now. And it's a question that I think about often, but I don't know that I've ever asked it. But how do you decide? You've got one in Florida, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. How do you decide what state to put a facility in?
Well, and the ones in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, more are outpatient locations. They do they're more like CTCs or community treatment centers. For here in Florida, and I think you look at regulatory compliance and how difficult it's going to be in each state to, what is it that they're going to require? Is it going to be so many hoops that you just can't do it? And again, like I said, it should be hard. It should be hard to open something, but, it shouldn't be impossible. So I think, first of all, you look at need, population, where people might be willing to travel, if they want to go out of state, that type of thing, which is probably why Florida and California are so popular, because they're destination states, So I think that there's a lot that goes into it. Then you look at population around the whether or not you're targeting a higher end or middle income or, insurance dependent versus you want to be all out of network or private pay. So there's a lot that goes into it depending on what you want your outcome to be, or who your audience and population that you serve will be. So that kind of helps guide you. But I guess there's a lot that goes into it. I just knew that I wanted to be in Florida because that's where I live.
That's a good reason. Is it difficult to open up a new branch in a different state? Do you have to spend a lot of time there? Do you have other people that you hire to make that happen? What does that look like?
Well, I think through many organizations, like you'll see some of your larger ones that build through acquisition, like where they will acquire properties or facilities or programs that are already in existence, which is what Regard Recovery is pretty much in the business of doing. That's how they expand. Starting from the ground up is a little more difficult, and usually those are more independent programs like ours was when I opened ours. But with Regard, through acquisition, it's a little bit easier because somebody else has done the legwork in the beginning for you to open the facility, and then basically you're expanding and then improving processes as you see them when you go in and you do your kind of your SWOT analysis of each program, and then decide kind of if you want to grow it or if that's something you want to streamline to just specific levels of care, or what you want it to look like, what population you want to serve. So I think that the acquisition is probably the easiest way to go for sure. Building from the ground up, you just have to be more aware of what they're going to require in each county, in that state, So there's a lot of different reasons why somebody might want to do it from the ground up versus acquisition, but most of the places I see that are growing through acquisition.
That makes sense. I'm also curious about the different treatment levels. So it looks like you have a full continuum of treatment at your facilities. I mean, granted, outpatient for Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and some inpatient. Do you do medical detox at the Florida location?
Yes, so we have 2 Florida locations where we do medical detox. We have Journey Pure Emerald Coast in Panama City, and then Destination Hope in Fort Lauderdale. So we're able to provide every level of care at those 2 locations. Journey Pure Emerald Coast is in network with many commercial insurances. We have contracts with most of the major players. And then Destination Hope down in Fort Lauderdale is all out of network. So any PPO policies will work there.
And so with you guys doing both a medical detox where they're inpatient and then the MAT or the outpatient detox, I'm curious, what do you see? Like, I'm sure that not everybody is stable enough or appropriate for an outpatient detox, but it's a very different approach. And I know a lot of insurances really like it when you do outpatient detox. I'm just curious about that industry and how you make those decisions of whether somebody goes inpatient or outpatient for that detox, and how that affects their treatment plan.
Well, outpatient detox, definitely utilizes MAT in that sense of trying to bring someone down off of whatever they're on. I can't tell you what goes into that decision. I can tell you that just in an inpatient or medical detox, that where they're going inside, they're monitored, they have nursing round the clock. And the reason that they typically do that is, well, you've got somebody that might be coming off of, high levels of alcohol usage or benzodiazepines or things like that could create some emergent event if they're not monitored. You could have anything from seizures to aneurysms to heart attacks to strokes, those types of things. So for me, I just feel like being in somewhere is going to provide better monitoring overall care. I'm not saying that there's not an argument for outpatient medical detox. I will say that I'm sure insurance companies do like that because it's probably going to be less expensive. You're not going to have to pay a higher per diem rate because you don't have as much supervision of the client or patient. So, again, that wasn't an argument one for or against the other per se. I'm only familiar with inpatient detox because that's all I've ever represented.
Now, as a clinician, I'm always interested in, I look at the MAT or the medically assisted treatment or detoxing that goes on outpatient, and I haven't been close enough to that to kind of see what that track is like for a person as opposed to that really close connection. But I guess it all comes down to how engaged they are still, and for some it's not appropriate, so they can step up to a higher level of care, and that's still an option for them. But I think it is a viable treatment, so I just thought I would ask and see what your perspective is on that. Talk a little
Sure.
talk a little bit about regard and some of the philosophy, or when you're talking to a family and they're looking at a loved one coming into treatment. What are some of the the important aspects that you share with them?
I think that's a great question because a lot of times families are under the mindset or in the mindset of, we got to get Johnny into treatment. He's the one that needs to be fixed, and we need to get him help because once he gets help, everything's going to be fine. And I kind of chuckle. I said, okay, but what the approach that we take, and I know specifically at Destination Hope, we have a fantastic family program where, the family members actually come in and spend an entire 4-day weekend. So they'll do Friday to Monday, where it's guided by a therapist, a family therapist, for the entire weekend. They will do extremely difficult, hard, delving into, family systems type of work. They'll do psychodrama. They'll do different things, different evidence-based practices that will help the family, which I call the secondary patient, help them heal and learn how to not trigger, how to not enable, how to not be a codependent, how to, when little Johnny comes out of treatment, what are we going to do to help support and to help, what's our part in this? Kind of much like the interventionist, we use the ARISE model. They go around the room and say, what's everybody going to do? Take a step towards, this person's recovery. It's kind of the same premise. What are we going to do as family members to help with Johnny when he comes home? And so I think that's one approach that we try to emphasize, is that this is a family disease and we want to make sure that everybody's getting what they need. So no one's at risk for relapse or breakdown or anything like that. The second thing is I said, you know what? I'm not the end all be all. And our facilities are not the end all be all. Sometimes maybe a patient can't travel, they can't afford, or they don't have insurance to cover, or that's too far. Although I always ask them, far from what? Your dealers, your enablers, your codependents, what I try to make sure that they understand is that you're going to do treatment in 4 walls somewhere. So let's make sure it's the best clinical fit for you, even if that's outside of my family of facilities. We want to make sure that you're going to get the help that you need. We often joke in the industry that the phone weighs 500 pounds when somebody's actually looking for treatment. You want to make sure that you reward them with treatment. So we will not let that person fall. We try to get them to somewhere that is going to meet their needs. And that's why we, in the business development role, we develop so many networking relationships because of that very thing. We have to have a provider that maybe does what we do, but in another location. Because if, Susie doesn't want to leave Jacksonville, well, we need a place in Jacksonville that Susie can go. and we rely on our partners out. I say this, I don't really think there's anything such as competition in this, because I said, yes, while we all have our roles and we do need to make our numbers, because we all have to pay the bills and our clinicians, it's I believe it's what we call coopetition, like cooperative competition, because again, maybe this facility does something that I can't do. This facility takes an insurance that I can't take. So you have to know all of that. So again, emphasizing the difference that we treat folks clinically, the whole family, as well as we're going to make sure that you get help somewhere. That's kind of our commitment to that person that's on the other end of the phone.
And what an incredibly important piece to address is that systemic, that family dynamic. And we've talked about that on the show before of, if you just treat the client, you haven't changed anything. They're going to go back into an unhealthy environment. They're going to go back somewhere and they're going to be expected to behave in the same way that they did when they left. And so, there's triggers all over the place if you don't have that family buy-in. So I love that you guys address that piece. I know that you talked about kind of that, and this is a twofold question, that network of people in recovery, right? That goes for the person that's in recovery, that network of people that they can connect with, their peers, after treatment, to where they can stay connected and in recovery and could keep doing their program. But you also have this network of facilities and other business development people that you work with, to, like you said, to try and get people placed in the right place, in the place that's going to work the best for them, which is so important, because everybody brings a little bit different specialty to the industry. Are those networks completely separate? That network of helping clients get into where they need to get, and that network of clients where they're in recovery and they're trying to, stay connected to their peers.
Well, so what I'll say is a little bit twofold. You have folks, again, that are working in the industry that are in recovery. So, some of my peers are actually in recovery and are part of home groups or other groups that can help clients stay connected. We have a strong alumni program at all of our facilities. So we have an actual alumni coordinator who they fall up under, they kind of have a dotted line to me, because many times if someone does relapse, they're in contact with them. They're constantly reaching out and staying in contact with them and connected, so that if something happens, they can either get them back in very quickly or help to find another appropriate placement for them. So that's why we communicate constantly on the alumni side of things. Now, in the network of facilities or other business development people, like counterparts of mine at other facilities, I stay in touch with quite often, because again, I say, this person just called me. This is what they're struggling with. This is what they're looking for. This is the insurance they have. And gosh, I just don't have a bed right now. Can you help? And they're like, absolutely. Let me get on that for you right now. Or, it's, gosh, I just, this is what he's looking for. It's the niche type of thing. Maybe it's a wilderness program. Well, I don't really have a wilderness program, but I'm connected with people who do. So that's his approach that this particular client wants. Let's let him try that, and we'll get him there. Again, I think that just we have a great and wonderful portfolio that I have to offer for clients, and I can meet just about any one of their needs, because we can do everything from detox all the way down to sober living. At Destination Hope, we even have primary mental health that folks can come into there, every level of care, including down to transitional housing. So, so it's almost like sober living, but for mental health. So, like, I can just about help everybody. But again, for those folks that I can't, that's why it's so important to stay in constant contact and to network with other treatment facilities. I know a lot, there used to be that thought process of, we've got to play our cards close to the vest. You can't share anything, and you can't work together, and you can't tour each other's facilities, and, you might steal this idea. I think that was a bunch of hogwash. I mean, I think that, and we've started to see a swing towards what I'm referring to now, is that I think people are a lot more open to working together because of that very thing. It's about the client. And I believe that when you help folks, that's just going to come back to you. People remember that. So that's our biggest push. But I hope that answered, about the alumni and the network of providers that maybe distinguished it a little bit.
And so you've done a lot of roles. You've played a lot of roles, CEO to, a tech and, with youth and now as business development. Tell me why you pick business development as opposed to maybe being a CEO that maybe seems like it's higher on the ladder, and maybe what's in the future for you.
Well, and I'm not opposed to being a CEO again. There's different aspects of each of those jobs that fit my personality. I love kind of the operations side of things and being able to see people in the facility and watch them progress. From the first day that they come into detox to, like, say, day 14, and you're like, I know you don't remember me in the first day you got here, but we had a full conversation and you look incredible, just to see that transformation. But operations and kind of that regulatory stuff interests me as well. But I'm also a talker, and I love, I'm a people person, so I love being able to be out in the community and talk to other providers or other, people in business development, clinicians, because again, you get that just to rub elbows with people that are treating the clients on the front lines, and to see how you can partner together. And when outpatient becomes not enough, saying, hey, I can partner with you to get this client detoxed for you, get them through residential and get them back to your care. And we talked about the intrinsic value of being able to do that. Now, we don't always get a call on the back end that says, hey, thanks for what you did. But, there's a few of those calls that I can recollect where they would get on the phone with me and say, Scott, you saved my life. Like, the fact that you got me the treatment, it saved my life. So what I love being able to do is connect families and patients with treatment, get them in, and maybe that's the beginning of the start of the rest of that person's life in recovery. And that's the intrinsic value that I have. I don't know that I could stay in a clinical role necessarily treating somebody one-on-one, because that can get heavy too. Like, you have to, in any role in this industry, I think it's always important, to have a great program of self-care, because I think you got to combat that burnout, that compassion burnout as well. But I think out of all of them, out of all the roles I've held, I think business development's been my favorite. Again, just because I get to travel, everything's new. You're not stuck in an office. You get to, like I said, just get out, have coffee, have lunch. And it's not just the social aspect of it. I mean, you really are meeting for a purpose, and you really want to develop those relationships so that, because we've said in this industry before, clinicians or people don't send to facilities, they send to people. If you and I have a relationship and you trust me and say, Scott, I don't care where you are, I just know you're going to take care of my client, so I'm going to send this client to you. So, so business development, I think, overall, my favorite role.
So you see yourself probably staying in that role. You don't have anything in the future, any plans to change that. You really fit in there and love that.
I do. I mean, I just recently moved into the director of business development role. I like managing teams. I also like I said, being able to meet with folks. I'm not opposed to it, to moving into another role if I'm asked, but, I'm happy where I'm at. I'm not necessarily looking, but again, if something's right and you feel like you can contribute and make it better, and you're needed, then certainly I would consider it. But I think I'm in the right seat right now. So.
You talked a little bit about self-care and burnout and self-care, which has been a hot topic in our industry with COVID and all of the isolating and virtual world that we've lived in here for the last year and a half or 2 years, coming on 2 years. What did self-care look like for you during that, and how did that affect you? Because I hear you talk about the social aspect, and it seemed like there was a lot of withdrawal from that social aspect. And I'm curious what self-care looked like for you, and how did COVID affect you specifically?
Well, I think that for one thing, you had to be very strategic with your Zoom calls. And I think we were very efficient being able to do things across a visual spectrum here, like either Zoom or Teams or whatever type of interactive video that you used. That was very wonderful because it gave us at least a connection that we otherwise would not have had if we just had to stay shut down and everybody locked up forever. I think that would have been, I think everybody would have gone stir crazy in that regard. I think that I had to be very cognizant of making sure that I got up and moved around, that I didn't stay seated and in front of my desk, just like you would if you were in an office anyway. I would go outside for probably in between calls, barefoot in the grass, just for some kind of grounding, just to be there and getting some natural vitamin D on my skin. I would swim. I played at the time, once everything started to open back up, played volleyball a lot more. That's something I do in the evenings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then, just like spending some time in the pool and just making sure, and going to the gym too. Like I believed in focusing on not just putting something here, but also making myself healthy, by eating right, taking vitamins, and making sure that I was working out in the gym and things like that. So it was kind of a multi-pronged approach, but it was more for stress relief as well as a way to just, get some aggression out, or whatever you want to say. It just kept me, sane at the time, I guess I should say.
Well, and you're not the only one, that's had to deal with that. All of us have, and it seems so simple, right? I'm just gonna walk away for a minute and go walk in the grass with my bare feet, or go stand in the sun for a minute. I think that self-care can be really simple, but even as simple as it is, sometimes we forget to do that. So I love that you talk about the simplicity of that, but that you have to do it, right? You have to take that time and take care of yourself, because it makes 10 minutes walking away and turning it off for a second is huge. And yet, how often do we say, yeah, that'll wait, and not take care of ourselves? So I love that you talk about that. Scott, it's been super, super fun to talk with you today and to learn a little bit more about all of these roles that you've played and kind of what's important to you, as well as with Regard Recovery and what they offer to clients and the continuum of care that they offer. Maybe in parting, leave with us a little bit of your contact information. I'm sure that people may want to reach out and connect with you and your programs. Leave some contact information and any parting words that you may have.
Absolutely. So anybody can reach me at any time. My cell phone's always on me at 813-300-7401. Like I said, you can text or call. That's my professional cell. What I will say is that find what you like to do in life and just do that. I mean, it is so short, as we're seeing these days. Find what you like to do, because then it won't seem like work, And I think the passion that I have for getting folks help, I knew I was going to be in a helping profession. My parents were both teachers, and I didn't want to do that, but I knew that I was going to be in a helping profession. So this fills that need. But do what you love, and by all means, certainly, if anybody needs help, please reach out. Like, I would hate to think that somebody thought, well, I don't want to be judged, or I don't want this to happen, or that negative consequence, and to have you suffer, or to have you have some other worse event happen just because you feel like somebody wasn't on the other end of the phone. I'm on the other end of the phone, call me.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more in the idea that, sometimes people suffer in pain, and I mean really significant pain, and, is all they want to do is end it, when in reality, if they could just, make that phone call or reach out to somebody and get that help, that's a temporary situation, even though it feels like, like you want to die. So I agree with you. Any time that we can, help people understand that there is help out there, and there is love out there, and there are people out there that really can help and want to help. So I appreciate that message too, Scott. It's been fantastic having you on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley. Anytime, I'd love to come back and spread the word. So.